Yo, my peoples, what's up? Namaste, ni hao, and all sorts of languages in between. Welcome to Shelf Stories, the channel that tells tales from games, books, and life. Thank you so much for joining me for this latest episode of Voices. I have a wonderful panel here today. I do it for different groups, and this is my pleasure to do this during Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So, this is a channel where I want to celebrate voices, celebrate the fact that we all come from different places, have different experiences, and it is now time to be joined by 6 beautiful people from all over Asia, America, the West Coast of America. We have time zones going on over here, different places within basically half the world, and try to get people from as diverse backgrounds as I possibly could, and some very, very articulate voices. So, like we do with voices, it is the voices episodes. The structure is very simple. We are going to hear from each of our panelists. They're going to share with you their gaming origin story, and then we're going to get into how is it going, being Asian, being AAPI in the board gaming space. Very simple concept, but before I'm yammering on enough, let me introduce my esteemed panelists. So I'm going to go from the top to the bottom, and I'm going to introduce, first of all, game designer. Very, very cute games that make me hungry whenever I think of them, like Macaroon and different other games like that. He is Tate Wu. Please briefly introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tate Wu. I was born in Taiwan and grew up in LA. And I have been in the board game industry for many years and in many different areas. And now mostly just design games and self-publishing most of my own games.
All right, fantastic. I loved Cat Rescue.
No, thank you. Thank you, Jason. Thank you.
And over here is Amanda. She is a streamer extraordinaire. If you have a stream, she will probably firebomb it or photobomb it or whatever you call raid it. Is that what they call it? The kids call it?
Raiding.
Yeah. She will probably raid your stream if you are not careful. So Amanda, please introduce yourself to the peoples.
Hi, I'm Amanda Panda. I'm a board game Twitch streamer. I was born in Alabama, so I was born in the south of the United States. Moved to California for the second half of my life. Now I'm a Cali girl, Southern California. And yeah, I've been playing board games all my life. Even though I am a only child, I've had board games like Monopoly, those types of big box games all my life, and got into modern board games in around 2012. So still pretty recent, and I've loved it ever since. So I'm happy to be here.
Oh, we are going to get into the gamer origin stories very, very soon. I can't wait. It's actually, I think it's people's favorite. I've heard feedback that it's people's favorite parts of these shows. It's like just hearing people's origin stories and how it folds into the family. We will definitely get to that. So let us continue with our panel. We have Sen, who is down there, famous movie writer. Also, you didn't think I was going to go there, did you, Sen?
No.
Inside joke. You can explain it to the peoples if you want.
Oh, wow. I just got off some calls about optioning one of our games for a movie. So it's sort of interesting.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure how this is going to work or happen, but it's something. And so it's really interesting to actually start writing media in the opposite direction. So normally I'm the guy that people come to make games out of their movies. And now some people are asking me, hey, have you ever thought about your game becoming a novel or your game becoming a movie? It's like, yes, I have thought about it, but I've always thought it was like this, like pie in the sky. Don't get hungry, Suze. Pie in the sky dream. He loves pie.
Wait.
You posted about pie yesterday. I saw the picture. I see those things. Anyway, I always thought it was this pie in the sky dream to, write a script for Hollywood or whatever. But now people are saying, oh, this is a really fascinating idea. And it was actually all because of, we decided to write a game about Asian representation. And that's what kind of got us all of these calls, because we got a couple articles in IGN and in the Huffington Post. So it's been pretty cool.
All right, and the designer of many of your favorite games, including Kingdom Rush and a few others. Developer of like a billion.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. I do
lots
of stuff.
A lot of stuff. You know her from the Dice Tower. She is very much an OG, as we say in my neck of the woods. Original, that's what that means. Original. She has been in the making content for you via the Dice Tower and her own stuff for a long time. Very respected voice. Could not do this panel without her. Her name is Suzanne Sheldon. Please introduce yourself to the peoples.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for that introduction, Suzanne. I've been working, making board game content for a while. And it's so funny you say that. I lose perspective. It doesn't feel like it's been that long, but I realize sometimes when we have conversations like this that, I mean, when I started, it was me for non-white women and women in the area in a lot of ways. So now I just feel old, I guess.
That's not what the O stands for.
It's okay. It's okay if it does. I've kind of come to grips with it. But I was actually born in South Korea and adopted as an infant. I'm a transracial adoptee, and my parents are Norwegian and Ukrainian by their births. So it's created throughout my life a really complex relationship to my Asian ethnicity and my cultural heritage in America as an Asian American growing up. And that's where I'm at.
We will get into it a little bit more in just a second, but I would like to introduce some new bloods of people who have just kind of risen up, inspired by, people who have blazed the trail, no doubt. First, we are going to get to a master of photography. If you go and check out his YouTube channel, he knows how to make things look really good, really good, way better than me.
Awesome.
And an inspirational figure making a lot of different content. He is Tim Choun. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you. My name is Tim. Hi, everyone. I take pictures and make videos of board games. Started this maybe like 2 to 3 years ago. I feel like it's a little bit early on, but I've loved the board games, of course, all my life. So I really pushed it further when we had to stay at home. So.
Yep.
And we've had a lot of representation from East Asia. We are going to bring in someone who can speak from a South Asian experience. Asia's a big place. I tried to cast the net as wide as I possibly could. But it is my pleasure. I had the pleasure of meeting her and Amanda just earlier this year, breaking into the new area of board game, which is streaming, Twitch, and TikToks and all that kind of thing. Could not think of somebody better to represent that end of things than Beneeta. Welcome to the show, Beneeta.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Beneeta. I am a Twitch streamer and TikToker, and I've been in the games industry only a few years, but it has been a lot of fun so far.
A lot of roller coaster.
It's been a roller coaster. This pandemic has definitely given me some more free time to explore different avenues, especially Twitch.
All right. So as with every episode of Voices, we are going to get into people's gamer origin stories. And most of these folks you've seen them on different podcasts and different video shows. And you may, if you've seen them in other places, you may know, a little bit about their origin story. Here on Voices, I like to incorporate family and parental guardian, whoever is the family context for different people and into their gamings. And I'd like to know that story. So it's interesting. Sometimes the family is like right there bringing them along. Sometimes the family is not, and it goes against it. And they, people become gamers despite that. So, and everything in between, right? So it's fun to hear people's stories. So I am going to go in alphabetical order this time. And I will start with Amanda, who is probably used to starting things in alphabetical order.
Yeah, like throughout my life, right? Or I would be the last one because my last name is very far down the alphabet. So it's either way. But so growing up, I only, my grandfather played dominoes by himself though, but I learned mahjong. My family basically only plays mahjong and nothing really else. So I never had anyone familiar to play with. So, and as an only child, I would ask for board games as gifts, but that would be a way for me to get to know people because I moved around a lot. So moving around a lot, I had to always make new friends. So board games was one of the ways I could do that. I would play with babysitters and stuff like that, and that was kind of my entry. I've always had like the big box games, like I said before, and then in the modern board game like sphere or industry, yeah, I also still do not play with family. Like I've tried introducing them, it doesn't stick sometimes. I can get them and their friends to play like a dexterity game, which is fun. But I love introducing a lot of new people, coworkers, and new friends to board games and getting them into the hobby and stuff. So that's how I kind of got to where I am. And finally, after on my birthday, I did an extra live stream with Suzanne and a bunch of board gamers raising money for Children's Hospital, and that's how I got into the industry and getting to know a whole bunch of people. More more on the Twitch side, on the Twitch streaming side. I knew them from Twitter and from chatting and from playing in local conventions and stuff, but I wasn't as deep as I am now. So it's been a crazy ride for me the last 6 months or so.
It's honestly how you do it. Like you'll get that question, like, how do I get started? How do I, contact somebody in the industry? The barrier is low. And
Totally.
we have a lot of friendly people over here who want to stream with you and game with you and make content with you, do podcasts with you, just bring your voice. And and this is part of why this is important too. Different faces, I mean, that we want to diversify this as much as possible to lower the barrier even more and make you feel even more comfortable doing this. So thank you very much for sharing, Amanda.
Yeah.
All right. But next, I think I can figure out the next letter in the alphabet. Beneeta, tell us your gamer origin story.
My gamer origin story. So I grew up playing mass market games, like Amanda mentioned.
Did you grow up here in the United States, or did you?
So yes, I was. My family is from India, but I was born here in Maryland. But I went back every year to India for summer vacation. When we used to have something called summer vacation, and
you went back for summer.
I know. It's very hot.
It was very hot.
My grandfather used to tell the story that their first AC was like the week before I was like the first time I visited, because I was like 9 months old, and they're like, okay, we need to get an AC for our first grandchild ever. So that's just a funny story. So I grew up playing, when I was there, we would play like carom board, which is like a dexterity game on like a big like triangle board where you're trying to get
like a pool stick, right?
No, you're using your fingers.
Okay.
Yeah, and like you're putting little discs into like 4 different pockets. So I grew up playing that, and then we played a lot of Scrabble, Connect 4, those types of games. And then, so I grew up playing that with my family. So they've always been into board games like that. And like Deen Patti, which is like an Indian version of poker. So I grew up playing that. And then in 2017,
is that with like a playing card deck?
Yeah, no, just like regular cards. It's poker. The rules are like slightly tweaked. But essentially it's poker.
Okay.
And then in 2017, my friend invited me to a board game cafe for her birthday, and we played Small World. And I'm like, what are these types of games? And I kind of like fell into the deep end like in 2017. So I like discovered more games, and I have not stopped since then. My family will play some games with me. I've gotten better about what games I ask them to play. Prior, a few years ago, I'd be like, play all these games with me, and it would just, a lot of them would backfire. So now I know like there's a certain level of games they're comfortable with. For example, like they love Chai, they love Splendor, they love like Sagrada, like those level games are good. I recently introduced my mom to Holi, which she loves because there's a lot of memories with Holi. Like I celebrate Holi. And in Holi, it's like a 3-level system where you're dropping like colors onto the lower levels. And like I was like teaching her how to play the game. She's like, wow, we used to do that in India. We would use like in our flats that we would literally throw water and color on people, and like no one could say anything because it was Holi. So, it's just cool that I'm seeing more like themes like that. And like, we shared a story, and like it was fun to like do that.
One thing about Indian culture, y'all don't care about throwing stuff on people. Walking around, I remember going because when I visited, I was doing festivals and just powder, turmeric powder, just covered in the stuff.
Yeah, Holi is so much fun. It's one of my absolute favorite. Like, I don't celebrate it religiously, but I celebrate it culturally. And it's really fun.
All right, thank you very much, Beneeta. We are zooming from B to S. So I had to do a little bit of quick calculation. We are going to the famous movie writer to my right down there. Sen, please share with us your gamer origin story.
My gamer origin story is long and convoluted, except it's not. So what happened was I was that precocious child who at age 6 had finished reading The Lord of the Rings like twice. And my parents didn't know what to do with me. So they took me to a university and put me in the basement with a bunch of like 18 to 24-year-old guys who were playing this thing that my mom heard about on BBC called the Dungeons and Dragons. And that is how I started gaming.
6?
That's awesome.
Yeah, was playing games with them at 6. So I spent my Saturdays in the basement of the local university playing Dungeons and Dragons with like adults. And because of that, like I was playing Car Wars and Ogre, like all the old Steve Jackson games, Dungeons and Dragons, Champions, Villains, and Vigilantes. So all the role-playing games from the 70s and 80s, and then a lot of the kind of beer and pretzel American type style games from Avalon Hill. I still have a lot of them, like Titan. So yeah, that's my origin story. Is my parents didn't know what to do with me, and little did they know that this would catapult me into this profession that they do not approve of at all. So there's this podcast that is called "Why You Know Doctor," and it is like the story of my life. So I'm a psychology professor, and I'm a therapist. And I think I told you this before, Jason. My parents don't understand what I do, right. And so they don't talk about what I do. They talk about my sister because she's a GP, so she's a family doctor. So they understand what she does, and so they talk about her, but they don't talk about me because I do weird things for an Asian son, I guess. I don't know. So they when I was a practicing therapist, they're like, we don't know what you do. We're not talking about you. And there's a big mental health stigma in the Asian community. So that's one part of it. But then also when I went back to academia, now they're like, oh, we can at least tell people you're a teacher. That we understand. So I'm somewhat in their good books, but like they won't hear about, the books and the movies and the games. They wouldn't understand. So I don't tell them about that.
You should be like, Mom, it's because of you.
Well, no, and the thing is that they know this. I don't know, Jason, did I tell you this story? So when I was probably 15 or 16, and so I went to university when I was 16 years old, and my parents, when I was 15, they brought me to another university to get me tested for aptitude testing, and the psychologist there told them the worst thing possible. They said, your son can do anything he wants. He's scoring off the charts in like everything. He can do whatever he puts his mind to. And that pissed my parents off because they didn't like that I dabbled, because I just do anything. And I usually do pretty good at anything I put my mind to, I do pretty well at. To the level that I can like make a job out of it. Like I DJ'd around the world type thing because I like DJing. So it's like, oh, I'm going to pick that up as a hobby. And then it's like, oh, it's now my job. I had a radio station show in Toronto for a couple of years, like on the actual radio. That's the level of skill that I get with anything that I put my mind to. But my parents hated that because they said, just focus on one thing. So forever, my parents thought I was a dabbler. And that's how I got into gaming, is because of them, because they didn't know what to do with me. I still don't think they know what to do with me, but it was that, or put me up for adoption, I guess. So I guess they chose to keep me, but put me in the basement of a university for a while. So then later on, I spent 9 years in university on my own accord, though. So that was a little bit different, though.
Sen, you are
A
a
lot of that
model
was because of
minority. You
gaming
make
too.
me look bad.
Well,
That's a
I'm
joke. If you saw
weird.
the previous,
Yes.
we will definitely talk about the model minority myth there. Or something like that.
I'm a weird part of the model minority.
Did you say you
Yeah.
DJ'd all over the world? We'll have to talk about that later. That is so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Oh.
seem to have such an amazing life. I
You
wish I
just
could
slipped
turn
that
anybody
in,
into
and
a
I'm like,
job.
did
Like,
he just say that? What?
and it was on the radio. Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
I
I
can
had
totally
radio.
see you in Hollywood now. Yeah, like totally. You'll
No.
be in the movies.
I
We'll
won't
see
be
you at
in
the
them. I'll-
Oscars.
Yeah, right.
Like,
I'll be
no,
happy
yeah.
writing stuff, but I don't want to be in front of. I don't even like being in front of this camera.
Sorry. Faces
okay.
are important.
Yeah, oh no, they are. That is the only reason why I do it. To be honest, like, so I started the Maple Syrup Show. I don't know, a long time ago. Suze, when did I do that?
A long time ago. It's been a
Thanks,
while,
yeah.
buddy.
It's been a long
I mean,
time.
I remember when you started it up though, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's been 5 years.
5, 6 years, something
Yeah.
like that. But I did it because of visibility. Like, I wanted people to see that, oh, there are people that look different than the people on the boxes, than the covers of the boxes that make these games. And so representation is super important to me. So I will continue to put myself in front of cameras.
Absolutely.
It's okay. Only if Tim is taking the pictures, though. He's real good.
Right.
I got you.
Suzanne Sheldon has been putting herself in front of a camera, doing the app segment in the Dice Tower. I remember you've gotten me into so many apps. I blame you for all the apps that have filled up my phone. I've
welcome.
cured myself now, but it was as I was getting into gaming, Suzanne app.
Oh, she's
app
the
segment
pusher.
was all over the
100%.
place.
She's why I have
Yes.
so many rolling rights.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And how I've now found like 5 different pie cafes around me. It's all her fault.
My legacy's intact.
That's right.
Yes.
All right, please share your gamer origin story, Suze.
Sure. Growing up, I think, same thing as what you've already heard, Clue and Yahtzee, Life, games like that for sure. But really, I think my love of gaming was seeded by my grandparents, and they played bridge and
Mhm.
euchre. So my family is got a lot of strong Midwestern roots. My father is a military brat, and so like he graduated high school in Turkey and things like that. But so like euchre and bridge and the kind of card games that were really popular on base or in the Midwest are the games that my grandparents played. My parents aren't really game players at all, but I would visit my grandparents and they would play bridge and they'd humor me and let me play, and I was terrible at bridge. I don't think I ever got good at bridge, and that just kind of seeded a general love. And then in college, I would stay up until 4 a.m. playing spades with a group of friends. But really, in the 90s, I discovered Magic the Gathering, and because I live in Seattle, Washington, and so that's
Mhm.
where Wizards of the Coast started. And a friend's brother had these weird cards when I was hanging out with her. I'm like, well, what are those? And he told me, and I went to the local game store, and they hooked me. They hooked me good.
Mhm.
And in between matches of Magic, there were other games in the store, and so we would fill time with little board games, and so that's where I really delved into the hobby back in like 94.
Mhm. All right. So I'm going to move over to Tate, who born in Taiwan, raised in California,
Yeah, Los Angeles. Yes, LA.
in Los Angeles. Okay, so please share your gamer origin story.
Okay. So I was born in Taiwan. So when I was very little, maybe second or third grade, I just go to a local mom and pop store and found like different type of board games. But that they're if you compare it, it's probably like a knockoff, from Monopoly, and they're all type of different games. So I just bought them, but I can't read the rules. So I have my aunt help me and teach me how to play, because my family, no one plays game, and my parents, they have their business, so they're very busy. And so I started to play games, and when I was little, and then I don't know, I love them, and as I went to school, I played with my friends, and I bought more games. different card games and board games. Then I started to like design my own game, my version, and then show how my friend test it and see that can be played and if they have fun. And that's the little version of me. And so after that, after we moved here, my my first experience with like a hobby game is probably in high school with Axis and Allies. I found that a huge box in the supermarket. There was so many miniatures. It looks awesome. I mean, just looked great. So I just bought it and then tried to figure out the rules with friends. So we play a lot of them. So that's and from then I time to time I think about like designing my own games. So before year 2000, I published my first game, and which was a disaster because I have no idea what I was doing.
Was it called a disaster or was it actually a disaster?
Yeah. Yes, aka a disaster. Yeah, because there's the industry is there. There's some distribution, and around that time we still there's no internet, so we use mail order. And I remember there's a Gamma magazine. I post I had a advertisement in the Gamma magazine before year 2000. But it's just not enough to really sell a game. And so after that, about year 2003 or so, I was taking classes in Otis. It's an art school, and then I found there's a class taught by Keith Myers about game design. So I took a class. It's when I really understand the industry, like how you actually design the game, how you publish, how you pitch, what's the industry about and who's the big major players and so forth. And then around the same year after that, I went to Origin. So that's my first board game convention. So so many years after that, so by now I published about a little bit over 20 games and licensed probably more than 5 games. And that's pretty much it.
Very cool.
Before now. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Tate. And we are going to round out with Tim, who is going to tell us his gamer origin story right now.
Yeah. So there was one specific game that Cambodians play every New Year's, and it's called Clack Cloak. And it's a super simple game. There's one dealer who has like 6 dice, and there's a piece of paper, and on that piece of paper, there's like 6 symbols of different animals, like tiger, chicken, and stuff. And the dealer, all he does is just roll the dice, and then you take bets around the board. So people place like $1, $2, whatever. It was a gambling game, or at least that made it way more fun in our families. So when you bet like $1 for say on chicken, and then 3 dice roll up chicken, then it's 3 times that amount. So it got really intense during New Year's, and like I loved it. I just loved like being a part of it. We used to just play with pennies and stuff. So having that family interaction to look forward to every single year was what definitely got me into it at first. And then time passed by. I was really into like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, the big trading cards, just like collecting them. And eventually, my older cousin, who was a big role model for me, she introduced me into Small World, like Beneeta. And
Ooh, cool.
yeah, exact same game. It was like Small World and Betrayal and Catan, of course. And from there, it just skyrocketed. So that's when it really kicked in.
Cambodia, yeah. Your family background is Cambodian?
Yes, they are.
What, are you? Does your family come from there, or?
Yes, I was born here, but everyone came from there.
All right.
Does your family play with you now? All your modern board games?
I haven't tried to introduce my parents into any modern board games. I would love to, but they haven't. It's mostly my cousins my own age or my fiance.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right. So, as with a lot of the panelists, the different groups that I have done, board gaming doesn't really come from our family, at least the hobby board gaming. Like the traditional games do, and we all have traditional games. As long as there are human beings, there's going to be play. It's just this the leveled up, graduated, more complicated, if you want to, depending on your perspective. That came. There's a very specific board gaming community, and that's what we're here to talk about today. And being who we are in the board gaming space, and like not just like being people, but like being from where we're from and looking like the way we look. So there's blessings in that and there's struggles with that, and the part of this conversation is to be honest about both. So I wanted to, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with Suzanne. You mentioned before that you started when you were here in board gaming, there was you, and
Certainly,
then
yeah. I mean, there were others. that makes it sound far too grand than it was.
The trailblazer, you're Daniel Boone.
I mean, let's not overblow it either.
Suzanne is the GOAT, greatest of all time.
Yeah.
I guess maybe talk to us a little bit about, go back to when you first started and how it felt. And then, kind of as it evolved, and, maybe kind of just tell us a little bit of a story of how, Asian American representation has played out in board gaming, and, how welcome you have felt, or, however you want to take that question.
Sure. I've told this story before, so I'll try to keep it brief, but the reason I started was literally I wanted representation in the industry. So I started gaming in 94, and certainly people like Sen have been in games far longer than that. But in context, I mean, that's a decent amount of time. And, being a 17-year-old Asian girl in a local game store, in the back of a dusty, dark local game store, surrounded by 20 dudes, white dudes, it was an interesting introduction at that time. And it's not that there weren't women playing games, and it's not that there weren't Asian people playing games. It's certainly, in my sphere, I was not a common entity.
Sure.
Right? But I loved games. I spent hundreds and thousands of dollars on games. I went into debt to buy Magic cards before I should.
Magic, it's one card.
Oh my gosh. And as I kind of continued on in the hobby, and I would attend local conventions, and the Seattle, Washington area is very, like, its diversity leans very heavily towards Asian representation. A lot of East Asians and a lot of South Asians, a lot of Indians and Pakistani people live in this area, primarily due to the tech industry. But I would go to conventions, and again, the quantity of feminine presenting people and non-white people seemed very, very low. And I spent a lot of my early gaming life feeling a little bit on the outskirts, a little bit different. And, and then the internet was created. I mean, I was a gamer before the internet existed publicly. And then, I see the internet growing, and I'm consuming content, and I just realized that I still felt really isolated. I still felt really like, I love games, I play games, but this can't be it, right? And so I reached out to, the biggest dude on YouTube at the time, and I emailed Tom Vassal. I'm like, hey, where are the women? And he wrote back, and he's like, I would love more women. Why don't you do something about it? Right? And
called your bluff. Tom called your bluff.
I guess so. And I thought about it. I'm like, all right, I can do this. I'm a grown-up, sure. And so I tried to find an area that I found compelling in gaming, that I thought I could add value to the conversation with, and figure out how I want to do it. But just like Sen, I've grown more comfortable with it over time. But when I started, I was like, I don't want to be on camera. I don't want to, there's no way I want to be on camera. I forced myself to, because I realized the value of representation is completely eradicated if I'm not in the content. And so I forced myself to do it. I hated it. If you were to dig up those old videos, they are atrociously bad. Like, they are embarrassingly bad from my presentation skills, and just everything is awful about it.
Well, Tim will be the judge of that. Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, I'm sure it was 10,000 times better than what mine was. Trust me.
But I did it. And it was, at the time there was a handful, again, of women and non-binary folks that were making content at the time in different channels. They were largely white. And I think it's one of those things that when I went out there, a lot of people were just like, okay, there's a person here. Great. A lot of people were excited. Like, great. It's nice to see. We would see the comments. It's nice to see a woman doing this, right? And then a lot of the criticism kind of floated around, right? It's these soft criticisms that are very easy to hand wave away, or very easy if you don't have cultural context of, the term is microaggressions that has become a very loaded term, unfortunately. But a lot of like, she up talks, or I hate her vocal fry, or she only is talking like, why is she talking about cute games? And just a lot of things like that. I've had, I've literally had somebody at a convention tell me, you're not like the other Asian women I know.
What does that even mean?
Yeah.
It was
Oh, what do they
interesting.
mean?
And a white dude
Wow.
who's in content still to this day was next to me, and he was just dumbfounded, And certainly my whole goal in being in content from day one was representation. It was, we are here, we exist, we deserve to be seen. And I want others. And the feedback I've gotten from so many community members has been really validating, that they appreciate that. But it's definitely had its challenges. And the more outspoken I became directly about imbalances and problems in the industry related to race, ethnicity, gender, harassment, safety, the harsher my critics and more virulent they have gotten over the years. The counterpoint is, there was one other Asian woman I know of who was making content when I started, and there's this woman named Mamie who focused in the hex encounter war game zone, and she made some videos. She's really delightful, but didn't necessarily have a huge groundswell of following at the time. It was a different time, but that was it. And so the counterpoint to kind of the increased negativity around my presence in this industry is the beautiful increase in people that I want to see. Like Amanda, like Beneeta, like you were, like, it's so great to have comrades out there that I feel that can relate and understand, and who can kind of take up the push to make gaming more inclusive and more diverse and more safe. That's been really rewarding to just be able to watch over the last, decade.
I want to thank you very much for reading my mind, Suze. I wanted to go to Amanda and Beneeta next because, we've gone from there to here, and now we're here. And I think like the streaming is kind of the next frontier of like, okay, this is the way people are ingesting board gaming, very quick, very snappy and jazzy and all that kind of thing. Make it look great. I imagine though that it doesn't come without its microaggressions and its issues. So I don't know if you have any specific comments about that or specific experiences, how, among the hundreds of decent comments, there's like those little things that are just like, if you had any response or reaction to that.
I mean, sure. Like, I'm not sure how many, what Amanda's experience is, but for mine, like, I get not a small amount of trolls, unfortunately. Like my first ever stream where I didn't just do board games, I decided to do like talking. So I categorized it under just chatting, which is a much bigger category on Twitch with like millions of people who will tune in for that. Like my first one ever, I got so many trolls that day where if I had, and like there were just like horrible comments about like, oh, you should go to the gym, or oh, like, sexual stuff and just like things like that. And if I was a slightly like less confident person, I probably would never stream again because it was terrible. And I didn't have any moderators at the time because again, it was my first stream. So I didn't really know how to like deal with it. Thankfully, there were some really great people in chat who was able to like tell me what to do, and I was able to like grant them moderator privileges to like kick out the people and ban the people. But yeah, that definitely like shook me up for a little while. Like, it didn't stop me from streaming like 2 days later, but it's definitely something that I had to think about. And I'm also on TikTok. And so there's obviously like not a shortage of trolls on there either because it's such a big platform. And like I posted a video about Among Us, and like the amount of hate I got for calling Among Us and like calling myself a gamer because I play Among Us was kind of crazy. Like it was ridiculously high amount of like people were like, "You're not a gamer because you play Among Us," and it was just I just hadn't really experienced trolls to that level before until like this past few months, and it's a little mind-boggling, but you just kind of gotta brush it off and not let it bother you. I don't know how Seuss has been doing this for like 20 years, but yeah, it's if you have good moderators in place and you have a well moderated community and you're careful about who you let follow you and who you engage with, I think that helps, and like protecting your community will like helps you in the long run as well.
You get to
Have you seen it reduce in time?
Okay.
Have I seen it reduce? Yes, because I do have better moderators, and my values are very clear on my on my page, on my Twitter. What I believe in is not really a secret, and what I'm against is not a secret either. And I have a Discord, and like the rules are very laid out as to what I accept and don't accept. Like I had someone trying to join my Discord the other day, and personally messaged me and was like, "How did you even get on the news?" Like, and he called me like the N-word and things like that, and immediately banned. Like, there's no like talking to that person. You just abandon them. Like, you clearly they're not a rational person.
Right.
Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, no, I was about to say like Beneeta must have like it might have gone up after she's been on the news and her amazing stream to raise money for oxygen concentrators for India and stuff. And for me personally, I don't fit the mold of the I guess the beautiful Asian girl. I don't know, the tiny classical beautiful Asian girl or the beautiful Asian streamer. Because a lot of my friends who are females, like they are gorgeous and they have tons of followers, or like Beneeta's gorgeous, and I don't fit that mold. So my community is much smaller, and I learn from Beneeta, I learn from other streamers, I learn from, I'm so thankful Suzanne, was in the industry, because then I got the confidence to, put myself out and say I love board games and I'm a board gamer and stuff. So luckily so far, I started out with good moderators, and I haven't really had the trolls. I curate my community. I definitely like learning from Suzanne, block people who like the harmful comments and stuff, and just pre-block them so that they can't, see or harass your followers, because they might not harass me, but they might harass my followers, or they might harass someone that replies to me. So that's why it's so important to preemptively do that. If I notice because I moderate a lot of Twitch channels as well. So if I notice that, yeah, exactly, I moderate Beneeta's, but if I notice someone's harassing them, I'll block them on my channel and just don't let them in. It's not gatekeeping. It's keeping us safe. It's keeping my community safe so that anyone can come in and feel safe enough to be themselves. You have to kind of keep hate and racism and stuff like that, because if you don't, then you're going to not allow people to feel safe enough to be themselves and enjoy your content.
They call it the paradox of tolerance. Like if your tolerance is too big, eventually intolerance will kind of take over the space.
Exactly. Yeah.
And living, breathing examples of that in the front lines, speaking of. But there are different dimensions of the area. We have two game designers here, and I'd like to ask Sen and Tate, whoever wants to jump in, how has it been breaking into the industry on as a is a self-confessed Asian, can't hide that stuff, right? And on that other level, being a game designer has that, and it doesn't have to be necessarily bad. I'm not fishing for bad stuff either. It's just just give us a picture, of what it's been like for you.
I think it's actually easy in a way. I think it's almost expected to be just that nerdy, that you're going to actually make some games, I guess. I don't know. I think the only thing where I get pushback from people is mostly when I'm trying to advocate for better representation in the actual games that people are making. So, I mean, I think people know when they see me question them about something cultural that I have an agenda. You can ask me about my agenda anytime you'd like. I will straight up tell you that my agenda is that you respect the cultures that you're playing with. That's bottom line it. That you do the research, and if you can't do the research yourself, you find somebody who can do the research, who's from that culture, educated about that culture, as close to that culture as possible.
More than an hour on Google, please.
Yeah, more than an hour on Google. And
my God.
yeah, so that whole story is interesting because I mean they did have a cultural consultant, but it was a professor of Japanese studies who was not, ethnically Japanese. And they might know lots about Japan, they might know lots about the Japanese language, they might know lots about the culture, but they may not know what it's like to be a Japanese person, to see that happen, and to hear about that. So it's an interesting thing that the older I get, and I'm pretty old, I think I'm probably the oldest out of all of us, the more I realize that the number one tool you need as a game designer is empathy. Empathy is like the biggest tool you can have to be a successful game designer, and that knows no racial boundaries. I mean, like whether you are Chinese or Cambodian or from India or anywhere, you have to have that empathy. And if you don't, you're going to make a product that is going to fall flat in some way, shape, or form, especially for the people who you're trying to represent. And so that's kind of the problem that I've seen so far, mostly on the negative side of things. And then so, I mean, what I've just talked about is sort of that, the model minority myth of, hey, that's what we're expected to do as nerdy, geeky guys who are good at math for Asian, right? Oh my gosh. And then the other side of it, we get characterized and caricaturized and lumped in together as one big sort of monolithic culture, which we are obviously not.
Asian.
Just Asian. So I think that's part of the thing with design is that so many games, it's like the Orientalism is rife in game design in terms of, ooh, that's exotic and weird and strange. So let's use it as a trapping for this exotic, weird, strange game that we've got going on, where it could have been about anything that had 5 things in it. Hey, Sue's made a list, actually. It's a good list.
Oh, God, that whole situation.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, it's I think that's where it comes for me. The issues of race, culture, ethnicity, and heritage in gaming is usually about the thematic use, and then how those themes translate into mechanics. But yeah, I'm never one to say, hey, don't make that game. Like I wouldn't say anybody can't make a game. I would say be prepared for somebody like me to come poke holes in your theme. That's it. That's all you have to deal with is some, hyper educated nerd telling you that is not what people wore in the dynasty that you're trying to represent. That's all. And if you can deal with that, then do whatever you want. But a lot of people want to do better, and I'm super satisfied with seeing that there's a new generation of game designers and illustrators who actually care about the source material, who care about the cultures that they're rightfully raising up and uplifting in a way, as opposed to exploiting and just using as a trapping for whatever next abstract mechanic they have. But something I've recognized this year is that a lot of different places think very differently about culture than than Americans and Canadians do. Even people in Britain, even people in Australia, who they just think differently about culture than we do because of they're where they are. And so there is some ethnocentrism, some egocentrism around how we think about it because we are particularly in North America right now. But
well, they tell me all the time.
Yeah,
they're not shy about like what the way you're presenting race, Jason, is not the way we think about it, not the way we think about it. And I completely am internalizing that, and that's why I want as many voices on my channel as possible.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of looking at it, but also self-limiting. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Tate? How has race and culture affected game design for you?
Actually, I don't. My overall experience is pretty welcoming. I wasn't I didn't pay too much attention about more on the media side or the marketing side or just race. I so on my first Kickstarter, that's in 2013. I have a lot of people from different countries help me playtest, and people supported the project, and people. I know a lot of publishers, U.S. publishers, they help me, like write letters to Kickstarter and help me promote the game. And when I'm in LA, and then I'm in a couple of different playtest groups. I'm pretty sure I'm the only Chinese, very few Asian in the group, but I am again. It's very welcoming. I just feel like I'm part of the group, and also there's a local convention. It's called Strategicon. I was special guest for the convention a couple times. So my experience, it's overall it's pretty warm, pretty maybe I'm just not sensitive enough. But after I publish the game, I do get people like even making videos, like complaining about the game, but I would just assume that it just I need to bring better game to the table. I need to work better. I need to make better game. There's always people not going to like your game, and they either write you or make a video, or it's not. I don't think it's just me or because I'm Chinese. It just my game just doesn't fit their taste. So yeah, but you brought a different perspective though. You brought like the representation of Asian culture. It just you have to you have to give don't put like kimono on the Chinese female don't just it with kimono because it's Japanese, right? So they have to do the research, make sure they not just use the title and just because it's fun, or it's because it's a good way a new way to make extra money. Yeah. So, but overall, I feel pretty positive as a designer, and then I'm hoping to have. I always hope there are more Chinese designers in US, but I don't know. I think Chinese just overall doesn't like to. I'm not saying all of them, but most like they just Chinese just like to play mahjong or play poker, and they'll go to Vegas. They don't want to play board games. It's just like doing something different than board games. So it just but otherwise, yeah, I would like to see more designers in the Asian Chinese or Asian designers in the market. Yeah.
You bring up a very good point about like sensitivity, right? And you hear that kind of criticism that okay, are people who are saying about representation, right? Are we quote unquote being too sensitive? Are we being too you know, like, I don't want to go the whole like route of like, okay, we're just people, but like, you know, do we need this? Do we like, can this just happen kind of organically and naturally? Do we need to kind of raise our voices? Because, you know, that can be divisive and it could be this, that, and the other thing. So I was wondering what different people thought. Tim, you can please chime in anytime if you have any thoughts on that. But, you know, like just that sensitivity issue that Tate brought up. I wonder if you have any thoughts about that.
Oh, sorry, Tim.
no.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. You go.
No, I was just gonna say that it's all, I bet it's always in the background. Like there's an undercurrent of, you know, like, oh, I feel that microaggression, so I'm not gonna go to that place anymore. It's just that when someone speaks up, right, they're like, oh, it's only one person speaking up, when probably like 100 times more people feel that way, or like live with it and just think of it as normal, or have adjusted their life or their way of doing things to fit, you know, what society has put out so far. So it's, I don't think that, you know, necessarily that it's that one person that's being a rebel, or like, you know, like trying to stir up, you know, trouble or anything like that. I think that they are the ones who are courageous enough to speak out and say, no, we need this. And then everyone else kind of benefits from that person if changes happen. And if you look at history, US history, it's been so many ups and downs, right? Like we have like, you know, you got the vote, and then, you know, people are trying to take away your vote. Oh, you know, like you know, you have rights. Oh, but not in this area, you know, and then so there's always going to be ways where people are showing you that no, nothing's changed really in the systemic part of whatever society you're in. And then they're called a rebel, or they're called a troublemaker, even though they're just pointing out something that's been happening for decades or centuries, you know? So that was my take of it.
Yeah, Tim.
Yeah, Amanda's she put it 10,000 times more eloquently than I would have. But I think she hit like the nail on the head. It's just a matter of there's one, you know, resonating thought that a lot of us don't, you know, aren't brave enough to speak up on until there's one person, and then all of a sudden, you know, it just gets amplified, which is a good and bad thing. You know, it's like it's a great thing that people are speaking up, but if only it was done preemptively. So
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
No, actually, no. You're the guest, Beneeta. Go for it.
Well, I'm just gonna piggyback off of what Amanda and Tim said. Like, you know, like having that one person who like says it, and like then using that person to like say something. Like, because like, you know, I think, you know, people have said it takes one person to like spark a revolution, and I do believe in some of that phrase. You know, that there's certain people that if they say something, you know, it gives me the courage to say something. And, you know, the first few times I needed to see someone say something that I believed in to also speak up. And now I feel more comfortable like being that first person. This is like a very roundabout way. I hope this makes sense. Like, for example, like Suze makes like great Twitter threads, and, you know, like I usually believe in what she's saying, and it helps me, give me the courage to say something. And now I've gotten to a point where like I feel comfortable saying something, and I don't have to wait for someone to say what I want to say. And I think that's so important, that like if you see other people who are like-minded and who are expressing their opinions, it gives you courage to do the same thing as well.
I was going to say, Suze, I'm sure I've seen on maybe a daily basis, people just thanking you for speaking up and speaking your mind, because it's so important what you do, and that you're visible and doing it. And, you know, one thing I will say though, is that it's very often that, you know, maybe Eric or Rodney or somebody, and they're great people, don't get me wrong, will retweet something that you've tweeted out, and they'll get like more engagement and more comments on it. I know you don't care about that, but I always comment back to them. It's like, hey, wouldn't it be nice if you would go read the original source and maybe tell Suze that you agree with her too, not just, oh, I agree, Rodney, with what you're saying. And it is So Rodney and Eric are Canadian. So by just nature, we're connected. We're the same person. Rodney, Eric, and myself.
All of
the same
Canada
person.
is just the
All
same.
Canada.
Yeah, we're all
Same.
symbiotically linked. So
Mhm.
I'm okay with that, but Suze not Canadian. So you have to go thank Suze herself. And
Yeah.
obviously that's not why she does this at all.
Yes.
But she stands as a literal like bastion of strength for a community. No, you do, Suze.
No,
Yeah.
seriously, you really
Seriously,
do.
like
Thanks.
you've inspired a whole generation of people who are like looking up to Suze for what is she going to say next, but also, oh, if she can say it, I can say it.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times it's a lot of, well, I didn't know how to articulate it, and it wasn't until I saw Suze, multi-thread, a
All
response.
right.
Right, that I knew how to do it, or I could figure out how to get my words right. And so you are like the prototype. You're like the model, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah.
No. I'm being serious here. That I think a lot of people look up to you and look up to what you say, because you hear it in back channels all the time. It's like, oh, Sue said this and Sue said that, and it's all right and it's true. It's like, oh man, I'm glad she said something because I didn't know what to do about it.
Well,
And
thank you.
it takes and I think I've talked to Jason about this before, like I call it privilege armor. I have tons of it. I have tons and tons of privilege armor, and so I will get up in anybody's face and say anything to them because there's nothing they can do to hurt me. Whereas there are a lot of other people who, if they start if they talk about something, they could be financially and everything else affected by that if this is their their only industry that they're a part of.
Right.
So I think what you do is valuable, and talking about the issues is the only way that we're actually going to get them solved.
Yeah.
You can't say goodbye until you say hello to a problem, right? So it's a really important thing to do that and to talk about these things. So
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, thank you. That's very kind. I actually have two things I'd like to bring to the table. One, stemming off of what Sen just said, is I think speaking out, right, is very important. And I think representation is very important. And there's kind of the representation of existence. And that's where I started. I didn't come on and start my content being, I want to talk about diversity in gaming. Right? That's not what I entered. No, I said, look, I know a lot about board game apps. I'm going to talk about something I know that adds value to the community. But I didn't come out challenging the community immediately. So I had the representation of existence, but I didn't have the representation of advocacy at that point. And as I grew into that and became more comfortable with that, and using my voice more to put out my thoughts and concerns on that, the commentary changed and shifted. And I think I am coded in a lot of privilege as well that enabled me to do that. I'm also stubborn as heck, and really, I kind of, feed myself on spite. So that also compels me to stick around. But, I think when we talk about speaking out and when we talk about naming issues, we also have to recognize that it's hard and that not everybody can pick up every mantle every time.
Yeah.
And that, there is a solidarity that can form amongst, micro groups and between marginalized groups that is beautiful and powerful. But I think that finding that balance between contributing and demonstrating that solidarity, but also demanding that solidarity is a really big challenge that I know I don't always strike that balance, but it's something that I think when you think about where the North American cultural zeitgeist has been in the last 4 or 5 years, that impacts us within our board game niche more and more. And I think that's why you're seeing more controversy. And I think that's why you're seeing more voices come out to speak about it, because the pressure has just risen. And I just know that that's something that's been on the top of my mind a lot lately. The other thing that's been on top of my mind, especially in context of, Asian Americans or Asian Canadians, North American Asian, is the conversation is especially challenging I don't know, Sen's making a face. Because we have to have a discussion about racial and ethnic diversity and a diaspora.
You're
Because
Yeah.
what a Japanese person experiences in Japan and their cultural context is so different from a Japanese American's person. And when we think about, again, trying to focus on what we're, our board gaming world, we have to think about, look, the American, let's be capitalistic about it. The American market is a massive financial market for board games, period. And so when we are talking about what Sen was driving to, when we talk about how Asian people are represented or Asian settings are represented in board games, and you can hear, like, you have to understand that a person that's Japanese American could easily take representation of a Japanese culture or Japanese Americans very, very differently than a person from Japan would. And there's kind of an incident that happened a number of years ago where somebody did some content that was perhaps insensitive around representing Japanese culture. And one of their defenses at the time when I voiced a criticism was, well, their Japanese friend in Japan thought it was funny. But when part of the shtick was this person who was dressed up like a Japanese person wearing a kimono and doing their hair in a certain stylistic way, their utterances were guttural grunts, kind of in a like a mock Asian way. It wasn't even words, that was just grunting. And if you're in Japan and you haven't experienced that kind of mockery when you're the only Asian person in a school and your peers are, oh, ching chong, wing wong at you, like, that's different. Like, they're going to absorb that differently. And that's one of the most complicated things that I try to steer the conversation around when we talk about Asian representation in games is, if you want to sell your games in North America, you should be considering not just Asia, but the Asia diaspora and how that's going to be received in the market that you want to sell in. You don't care how your game sells here, and you don't care what Japanese Americans or Korean Americans or Cambodian Americans think about the game and the culture and the setting that you're putting forward, then have at it. I mean, and just own that. But I think that's a really big topic. It's something I'd love to see our industry dive into more and more over the coming years, but it's complex. And so it's a difficult discussion.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, even like within Chinese people, Northern China is totally different from Southern China in a lot of cultural ways. Taiwanese Chinese is different than American Chinese, and even first generation versus second generation American Chinese have different views versus Chinese in UK versus Canada. It all has different viewpoints. And even when I'm talking to other Chinese Americans of the same generation as me, we have different life experiences when it comes to racism. Like, even me in the South, I didn't feel as much racism as a first generation Chinese American in California. And it was like, even her friend, which is the same, she grew up with this person, and they're both first generation Chinese Americans. They also have completely different viewpoints on racism and how they feel of other people being racist to them. So it's really hard, and it is a tightrope to walk. But if you are sensitive or you are doing your best to understand and talking to a lot of diverse people, it comes through. And I think people see that and can understand that you are trying your best to understand all the the cultural significances.
I also think it's like a little bit of a generational thing too. My dad moved to Chicago when he was like 12 or 13. So he experienced like severe racism, probably racism I've never experienced and hopefully will never experience. And like, so his tolerance for microaggressions is much higher than mine, because, for me, like, I don't feel like privileged to be born in America. It's like my right. Like, I was born here. Like, I expect certain things. While he comes from the mentality that he's so lucky to be here. So I think some of that, when we speak out, some people are like, oh, it's not really a big deal that they use this font in the board game. While like for some other people, it's like, no, this is like your Asian font. Like this is racist as shit. Like use a different font. Like things like that. I think that also like colors the perception of it as well.
I'd like to actually bring up what you said about Tate, about the Chinese person in like a kimono or whatever. Like, I'm sure, like, what are people's stories, like, either incidents or games or whatever, of just like, the hodgepodge stereotype, the Orientalism that is experienced. Does anybody have like a thing that kind of leaps to mind that's like, ooh, this one makes me like, I see it a lot, but like this one maybe a little bit beyond the pale. Does anybody have any incidents of that?
I think the Henry Wu thing, where a white gentleman chose an Asian name to put on the box and design a game under an Asian name, even though he's a Caucasian gentleman, was just really bad for him.
That brings up appropriation.
Yeah, that was a weird situation. It was supposed to be an homage to one of his college professors or something, but nobody else knows that. It's a very strange thing to do, but there's definitely some things out there, just not doing research. So, I mean, the biggest one would probably be Blood Rage. And here we are, talking about Eric again, but Blood Rage and the Kohati. Do you know the story? Does everybody know the story? Well, I know Suze knows because Suze knows all, but no. So what happened was, they needed another demon, and so they were doing their research. And of course, research in this day and age, you need stuff quick, turns into Wikipedia. And as a professor, I'm telling you right now, do not cite Wikipedia. It is not a primary source. I will give you a 0 on your paper. So they used Wikipedia for their resource on Japanese mythology, and somebody, because Wikipedia is not a primary source, it is crowdsourced, had put in their friend Kohati, who is a farmer in New Zealand, as a Japanese bird-like demon. And so now he is immortalized as a figure that doesn't look like him, but his name is used to name a Japanese demon. Now, the defense from Simon and everything is, oh, this isn't really Japan. This is pseudo Japan or fantasy Japan. It's like, well, no, it's kind of coded Japan, guys. And so it's just, bad research. That's all. And I don't think it was necessarily Eric. I don't necessarily think it was Simon intentionally doing anything. It's just bad research. And, maybe even when you're Asian, because that's a big Asian company. They're in Singapore. Getting people from the culture you're trying to emulate to do some of the work, and paying them for it. They have money to maybe not ever let this kind of thing happen again, because it just made it look very foolish. So that's one example of that. There's many more.
I guess the lesson being that, because we talk about like hashtag Stop Asian Hate, and we talk about like there is real like stuff going on there, and I got, when we had a conversation, Sen, about like Stop Asian Hate, you got that. I got some comments that it's like, okay, is it really that bad?
Yeah. Right.
Is it? And a couple of things. Is it really that bad? And it's like, okay, so there's like different levels of it. So like a lot of people are talking in the gaming industry, where it's like in the gaming industry, we're talking about these kind of microaggressions. We're talking about this and that third thing. And it's like, maybe, there's this sense of like, okay, is it really that bad?
Well, I mean, 25% of Americans polled today don't think it's worth doing anything about. So is it really that bad? And I mean, okay, so microaggressions, if we want to talk microaggressions, they by themselves are very small. That's why they're called microaggressions. It's the constant exposure to them that wears people down, that makes people tired, that makes people say, I'm not going to fight this anymore, or I'm not going to be part of this community anymore, or I'm not going to, post anymore, or I'm not going to stream anymore, or I'm just not going to make games anymore. And if that's what people want, then don't do anything about it at all. But some of us actually kind of like this community with all its foibles and would like to remain a part of this community. And we're telling you, here's what hurts. Here's what causes harm to us. And maybe you could stop it. And then after that, you're responsible for your own actions. And, people are like, oh, I don't like to be judged. Well, then don't do things that people say they don't want done to them, or that they're exposed to that are negative. Nobody wants to be the party pooper to stand up and say, hey, there's something wrong happening here. I don't like doing it. Suze doesn't like doing it. We don't like it at all. We'd rather not have to do it. We'd rather not have to talk about any of this at all.
I think I hear like a sigh somewhere in Seattle whenever Suze lines up like a giant tweet thread. It's like,
oh yeah, for sure.
Well, I think the thing with this concept of sensitivity, going back to the question that you asked about earlier, right, is the counterbalance of, is it that bad, or who cares, is okay, then who cares? Like, if you don't care, you don't care. Then, right?
Don't tell me not to care.
Show me the counter harm that happens by asking publishers to invest in proper research, or to take the steps to ensure that their game is appreciative and not appropriative. And show me the harm that comes from that. Like, if, not to, like, Tate said that he felt very welcome. That's amazing. That's great. That's what we want. Now, if I said, hey, I don't feel welcome because this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened,
what they'll say is,
Tate
why can't you be more like Tate?
Go, well, you don't actually feel that way, or too bad for you. No, he's not. Like, he can have that experience. I can have a different experience, but Tate's not going to step on me because I'm having this concern. And by me asking and making suggestions on, like, here's how you can do this better that ceases the harm, how does that harm Tate? I'm sorry, Tate, I'm not picking on you, sorry. But, like that's the question. If you don't care, then don't care. And unless you can show me that asking for respectful representation, asking you to take appreciative steps, not appropriative steps, does harm to the game, the industry, you as a person. Like, don't tell me, oh, I have to spend money. Like, oh, you spend money in illustration. Like, don't even. Like, and cultural consultations are not that expensive. There's no harm. So you literally have people saying, I am being harmed. This is why it hurts. Here's how you can fix it. And the solution has no, like, it's good. So if you don't care, then don't care. But they do care. They say they don't care, but they must, because they keep on talking.
Exactly.
Well,
It's like, it's all the,
go ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, it's just saying, it's all the people that comment, like, well, all this negativity. I'm like, well, like, if you really don't care, you don't need a long comment thread of why you don't care or why no one else should care.
It's just a game in all caps.
Yeah. They just have to make their opinions known, right? Like, I don't care, and you have to know this.
I think the idea, Suze, is that, they talk about, okay, you say you're going to change it, but like, it's actually cancellation. Like, you actually really, that's a lot of, don't you want to like take things away, and like maybe some things will change, but like, if you keep on talking, then it's like, well, people will stop wanting to make games anymore, and you'll make it this, that, and the third for, you'll make it uncomfortable for other people to make games and all that kind of thing. Like, people are just ashamed, they're afraid of losing games.
I guess
it's loss aversion.
It is, in a way. And I get that people are like, oh, I'm so afraid if I open my mouth or say anything that I'm going to get quote unquote canceled. And I get that on some of my threads when I talk about, culture and things. But I also just say, hey, read the whole thread, because never anywhere did I say stop making games. Never anywhere did I say I don't want you to use Asian culture. Never anywhere did I say you have to be Asian to make a game about Asia. I didn't say that at all. I just said, if you make mistakes, own them. And here's ways to not make mistakes. Here's some solutions. If you want to make it in a way that is, thoughtful. That's all I ask for, is thoughtful application of culture to games. That's it. I could do a whole presentation on it, but like, that's all I want. I don't want you to spend more money. I don't want you to do any of these things. But if you have to thoughtfully apply the culture because you don't know that culture because you're not from it, then the question is this your story to tell? That's the only other thing I want you to ask yourself. Is this your story to tell? Because chances are it's not. But if it's not, doesn't mean you can't make the game. Just means you have to realize that, hey, this isn't my story. Maybe I should ask somebody to help me who is part of that story, or maybe I should make it a little more fantastical and not lean into the half-assed history I know from Wikipedia or whatever, right? So that's really it. And I think there's a lot of people who are doing some very lazy research on things. This was in that whole thread that, I'm Chinese. The person I co-wrote my game with about China is Chinese, and we still hired Chinese consultants because we don't know everything about China. They don't know everything about China either, but they know more than we do by ourselves. Like, collectively, there were like 5 or 6 of us: sensitivity, culture, restaurant, and language, because I don't speak Cantonese. And then the two main writers, between the 5 or 6 of us, we at least have more of an idea than just me by myself about what an Asian immigrant experience should feel and look like. So yeah, I mean, I really would counter people. And people were on my thread saying, "Oh, so you think that's the only way to do it? That's the best way to do it?" It's like, well, yeah, I do think it's the best way to do it, but I don't think it's the only way to do it. And I also don't think you have to do that. I'm not being prescriptive about it. I'm just giving you an example of how somebody who actually lives from that culture lives that life every day. I can't change it. I still need help. So where does somebody who's not part of the culture feel or think that, oh, I don't need any help whatsoever to make this game about a culture and represent it in a way that is appreciative and not appropriative, to appropriate some words from Suzanne.
And speaking of like cancel culture from a social media perspective, like, you do worry that you're going to lose all your audience, right? But then I'm like thinking, why do you want racist, hateful, sexist people watching you? Why do you want them, in your threads or in your chat? Or why do you want them supporting you? Like, why do you, want those types of people? So that's like a question.
I also don't think cancel culture is real. I think it's called you're facing the consequences of your own actions and words, personally.
Yeah. One thing that I noticed in this group, and this is maybe a slight discussion shift, is the diversity amongst the people on this call alone. And like, we can't represent an entire like continent of Asian people. But when I think that, I can't remember who said earlier, but one of the interesting things about Asian settings in our industry is, and one of the things that like I think this very panel is trying to kind of push forward, is the idea of like the non-monolithic Asian.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I think you can see if you look at board games overall is an Asian set game tends to be in a very narrow range of time period and a very narrow range of like cultural touchstones. They're the ones that fascinate Westerners perhaps more, or, maybe they're the only interesting thing about that culture.
I blame Dynasty Warriors. 100% blame Dynasty Warriors.
But like, one of the things I would love to see is allowing, if you're going to represent, if you're going to take from Asian cultures, let's talk about what that really means. Where is my game set in modern India? where is my game set in modern Cambodia? Like, there are so many rich elements from cultures around the world today that we could take, whether it's like traffic patterns, boat patterns, like modern trade. And I know, like, Jason, you and I have had a discussion about how certain antiquated thematics can be modernized because there's so many interesting things. But I think you see this perhaps a little more heavily in Asian set games, let alone, I mean, games set in Africa. I mean, you got like diamond mines and that's it. Or, you know, jungle, like animals.
Yeah.
African animals are more interesting than African culture and African people, it seems, to the industry. But I think that to help really embrace Asian culture in the industry, I would love to see more, like a different view on what diversity even means. Like, let's see those games that show not people in kimonos, whether they're Japanese or Chinese people that were accidentally dropped into kimonos. Let's walk away from the idea that everything has to be about Zen if it's set in Japan, or, you know, the beauty of the Orient. Like, there's real interesting stuff. There's food culture stuff that's so interesting. There's so much great stuff in Asia that I think board games could benefit from, that I would love to see more of.
Yeah, and let's not forget
to the game designers on this call. I'm not looking at you or anything.
And let's also not forget that Asia just isn't East Asia, right?
Correct.
So we have representatives here from Southeast Asia, representatives from South Asia, and I'm ethnically Chinese, but my family's actually from, you know, near Malaysia. So I actually don't think like my friends who are from Hong Kong at all. I think more like, I don't know, like Singapore, Malaysia, all that kind of that area. That's my culture. So even when you look at somebody who's ethnically Chinese, you know, the experience from Taiwan, where Tate's from, and the experience from me from Brunei, Borneo, where my family's from, totally different experiences because of the surrounding cultures and the politics, the geopolitics are just ridiculous in Asia. And a lot of people just don't understand. And so they do, like you said, Suze, aim for those low-hanging fruits of ninjas and samurais and Romance of the Three Kingdoms and, you know, bubble tea and stuff like that.
Okay, so, I do support the bubble tea games.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. More bubble tea games.
Was a lot of fun.
All games about Asia should be about bubble tea now.
Yeah. Oh, actually, hey, Tate, did you see the game about the night market?
Oh, yeah, I backed it. Yeah, from Taiwan.
Yeah.
Right? I think the designer
no, it's set in Taiwan.
No, it's set in Taiwan. Smooks did some of the cultural consultation
Is
for it.
Is it from Alley Cat Games?
No, it's from Talon.
Talon
Strikes.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. So it was just interesting because it's not a Taiwanese designer, but the designer, I think, lived in Taiwan for quite a while. So just interesting. I hope that that's good. And then, you know, Hot Banana Games is doing that amazing dim sum game.
That was so much fun. Such a fun game.
And then, you know, a lot of people are doing some really cool stuff. And obviously, you know, there's a whole, you know, Japanese game market, which is phenomenal. And I think we've got probably 7 fans of Oink games here. At least two hardcore fans, myself and Suzanne, I know, are hardcore fans of Oink games. And they have a whole game culture of their own that is slowly making its way onto Switch. Actually, if you go to Kickstarter right now, sorry for an ad, but you can go get all their games on Switch. It's amazing. So yeah, I think there's a lot more out there that is intrinsically Asian. And because I do, you know, obviously study film and things like that, there's a whole storytelling style that is totally not North American. Like the Japanese and Korean and Chinese storytelling methodology is completely different than normal, very, very kind of linear patterns that happen in North American writing and British writing. So it's just interesting to see that there's entire game cultures over there and entire other cultures over there. And please go check them out. We don't have to use Asian culture as like a skin to put over stuff all the time. I think that's where it gets lazy, and that's where I get kind of disappointed, I think. You know, I would rather see something being like, if you're going to do it really in an interesting way, as opposed to this is just, it could have been fantasy. It could have been anything. We just chose Asia because it, we had a cool takeout font that we wanted
Like
to
we
use.
know itself.
Takeout
No.
font.
At the end of the day, like we're getting these things because we're getting these things. Like, what's the best way to win an Oscar is to have won an Oscar. I think there's an entrenched like habitness is like, okay, I know I can sell X amount of copies if I put this on there. If I put like
Yeah.
Brunei or Borneo or whatever it is, and so it's like it's that convincing people to kind of like bust out of that shell and try something different, and it could be amazing. It could flop. Could be a disaster. But I mean, I think that the idea is that, and again, speaking to the purpose of this panel, is to highlight multiple people sharing a desire for something different. We're from all over, right? Streaming and video and videography and all this, like we're all looking for something a little bit different, and we will support you. Take that leap of faith, right? Please. All right. So
sorry.
obviously we could be here a long time, but we are starting to get to kind of a wrap up phase. A lot of points about appropriation and representation and all that kind of stuff. I like to end these panels with just kind of like a looking forward. And I think we kind of start to get there anyway. Looking forward of things that people would like to see in the board gaming space. Specific or general, however you want to take that question. And I'll go in reverse alphabetical order. I'll start with Tim. Is there anything in particular that you would like to see, or maybe something that you'd be excited to film or excited to shoot, and just kind of like think through that.
Yeah, Suzanne and Sen really touched on this a lot, which kind of just brought ideas for me too. But I haven't seen any other Cambodian photographers or people that play board games in general, which is crazy. Actually, it didn't even come to mind until I thought about it while everyone was having that really thoughtful discussion. So it would be really fun to film a board game based on Cambodian culture and like including all like the clothing and like the food culture. Like there's so much rich content there that I can resonate with, and that I would love to like film and just see and just play and just enjoy outside of our yearly anniversary game.
How good would you make that look?
If a game designer wanted to
fun.
set a game like pulling from Cambodian culture, is that something that you could work with them on? I mean, I don't know, like your game design aspirations, but perhaps as a cultural consultant, you could input based on your personal experiences.
Oh, easily. Yeah, I would love to do that. That'd be really fun.
Just hit me up, man. Like I've wanted to work with you ever since you made a video for one of our games. So I will gladly help you design whatever you want to design.
Oh, design, that's far from my realm yet.
No. But I
don't know how to do like tic-tac-toe right now.
That's what they do, man. Those game designers are like, "Are you gonna design something? Here's some index cards."
I'm like, yeah, okay. It'd be really nice to see, though. It'd be super nice to see.
Yeah,
and it's as much as somebody might have that instinctual, like, is that really important? Yes, it's really important. It hits such. Like we can't even describe, right? And I have a game that is after my culture, and when it goes wrong, it's like, so
it's like a disappointment, right? It's like
it may more than that. It depends
probably
on how wrong it goes. But yeah, no, I think that just hearing that, I got the sense that it would be a really important thing for you for someone to hit their table and hit your camera. All right, Tate, is there something that I mean, you're a workhorse, man. You're plugging away. You're always making stuff. So in a way, it's like, you are the change you want to see, right? You think of it and you want to make it. Is there something in particular that you think of in terms of representing, who you are and your perspective that you really would want to see out there?
It's I'm still trying to just mainly making games for family. So that's why I have so many, animal games. I do have some more themed, more like Chinese themed games. But like I think just like any publisher, like when I create games like that, I even though I'm Chinese, I consult with my friends who actually know the history and know what their unit color or unit symbols, all everything down to their team colors. It just had to do more research when you are working on something is that is tied into culture. I think that's important. I am actually pretty happy about in the recent years that a lot of games that had slave in it, they got removed. That it's a, when I heard that years ago, I believe that is a new movement in the board game publishing. Publishers, they have to understand that there's things that even though it is the history, but it is not acceptable in the current time. So it is no matter talking when they publishing anything, not just Asian culture, any culture, they have to be mindful, respect, have respect, and the would be great if they have the love in the culture when they make the
Right.
game. It's not they just it's not something that they just skinned it. It's like, oh, this could be a cool samurai game, so they just swap it with the samurai. So yeah, it's people with like I know a designer, he's working on a game with a Chinese thing, and he just he constantly asks me about the term and the usage of terms. I have a lot of respect for this person because he respects the culture and he wants to make this cultural game. And I think that's important for publishers. Yeah, and same thing. If I do that, like I don't like for my games, I don't write. Even though I can write Chinese, but I don't translate the games. I don't write the Chinese rules. I have someone actually. They're in Taiwan. They write the rules because I don't want to make any mistake. I want to make sure it's whatever they write out, it's right in the current cultural or social way. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Suzanne. We all know what you want to see. Your thoughts are so out there, but if there's something like like that's kind of like top of mind at present that you would like to see moving forward, then please share.
I think focusing on the area where I often speak to, and this may come across as somewhat critical, but I feel like a lot of the conversations that we have about representation, inclusion, diversity are what I would call like 101 level. As you're going to college and you're getting a broad spectrum understanding and kind of just understanding the problem. And I think that, sometimes you can't just go from point A to point Z. You have to take some interim steps. But I would love to see the conversations progress past what I feel like are kind of the preliminary discussions and just kind of a broader acknowledgement that these challenges exist. And, I'd like to move beyond the platitudes. I'd like to move beyond the comfort language about making things really softer and really start digging into the real root and really moving on to the more challenging, more nuanced, more detailed, and realer discussions, because I think that that's where we're going to see the next big shift in progress in the industry, both within the community and within the product itself.
Interesting. Good. Thank you. Sen, if I can ask you for one parting thought, something that you like to see really moving forward.
Something I'd like to see really moving forward is normalization of bios of designers and artists and graphic designers.
You've been on this hobby horse for a little bit now.
Yeah, just a couple days, but it's important because and people ask me, is it because you're like super vain about you want to see your name on everything? It's like, no, not really, but I need other people to see my name on things. Not because it's my name, but because it's a name that looks different or a name that looks like their name. I was sitting on a panel where was I? might have been San Diego Comic-Con. And after I was done my talk, an Asian person came up to me and said, "I'm so glad that I saw you talk." I said, "Oh, great. What did I say that was so important to you?" He goes, "Nothing that you said. It's just that you're Asian." And I didn't know that, there were a lot of Asian game designers, and you were so professional, and you spoke well, and et cetera, et cetera. Like they just didn't know. And I got to talking to the person, and they said, "Yeah, I've had this idea in my head, and I just I didn't know that I could be part of this community." And it's really interesting to say that when a lot of people are like, why don't you just join a community, right? When you've spent a lot of your life being ostracized because of how you look, and it could be just small little microaggressions, you don't feel welcome. And so you look at everything like a potential problem. Like, am I going to be welcome there? Am I going to be welcome there? Am I going to be welcome there? And you lurk and you kind of do your stuff in the shadows. But then when this person saw me, he's like, okay, now I know that I can do this because I see somebody else who looks like me do this. They were much better looking than I am. So they'll probably do even better than I do. I don't know, whatever. But yeah, so, I mean, that's happened to me at least twice or three times in not only game design, but in teaching as well. When students have said, I didn't know that this was a place where, especially because I teach in a faculty where it's mostly women, that men were welcome in this profession, and that Asian men especially. So it's important. I can't stress that enough. If you don't look different from the vast majority of the people you're around, you just don't know how it feels. And it's hard to explain, but it's real.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So yes, pictures and bios.
Oh yeah,
that's what I was talking about.
Sen, but it's hard to write a bio about yourself when you keep on, you're not told. You're told to be humble and not braggy, and then it's like hard for me to figure out what bio to write about myself.
I've made a Mad Lib that you can just fill in the blanks, and there's your bio, and you just kind of read it and said, "Does that sound right?" And you can change some words here and there to make it your own. But if you need that, I've got a bunch of those types of things to help you. Promote yourself. It's important.
Yes, please send it to me.
I will.
Go ahead, Beneeta. One thing that you would like to see.
I would like to see more than the usual 3 reviewers on Kickstarter pages. I would like to see more diversity in people who are creating content, because I am a content creator. Like I do not design games, and that's important to me. That like we're all given equal chances, because I don't think we are right now. And just seeing diversity in that, hopefully more people we're like, oh, like Beneeta looks like me, I can do this too. Like, because like that's so inspiring. Like I had a cousin who was like, that's so cool that you're Twitch streaming, because I'm Indian, and like you're supposed to be either a doctor or a lawyer, and like that should be your job. And so I think I just want to see people like me given the same opportunities as like white dudes are.
All right, Amanda.
Yeah, I completely agree with Beneeta. It's like I think I don't want to see the tokenism happen anymore, especially on different panels or different shows. Like I have this person, and then you see that person everywhere because everyone's like, oh yeah, I can just pull that person and I don't need to look anywhere else. And that's the one person, that one Asian, even though, there might be only Chinese, but then what about Indians and what about, Malaysians? And, so I hope that tokenism, like we can show more diversity in how Asians act different Asians, they have different cultures, and, like I'm an outspoken Chinese person. I'm not tiny, I'm not thin boned or anything like that, like it's okay, and then, the other thing was that I just, I lost my train of thought. But yeah,
so passionate.
I was just like, oh, I hate, it's hard breaking into an industry when you feel like, oh, they've already got an Asian woman? Why do they need me? Will I be able to
Yeah.
come in, and will people accept me when there's a whole bunch of us that are awesome? And I hope that more conventions, more panels, more shows like yours, which is amazing that you have this diversity, doesn't do the tokenism part. And that, oh, that's the other thing, is that white guys speak up against racism. It's like they had a survey or something, that if a white male, Caucasian male, spoke up against racism, a lot of people will like back down or realize how wrong what they said sounded. So it's like we need those allies like Rodney, who amplifies our voices and gives us a place in front of the camera for his audience to meet us and stuff like that. And I feel like they need to speak up and say that that's wrong, and then hopefully that will start other people to, because if we just keep saying that's wrong, we get pushed down, we get saying, oh, it's just they're too sensitive or whatever.
Yeah.
So we do need those allies to stand with us, and especially with big platforms, to say no, that is wrong, not just to do what's right, but also to say when it's wrong.
I do
I
not have a
agree.
giant platform, but I am offering myself as an ally to every single person here at this screen. You mentioned before tokenism. Yes, I selected every single one of these people here for their identity, so to speak, but also because they're excellent. We are Asian, everybody here, and we are excellent. As I go back to Mick Installer in the first Black Creators panel, Black excellence, Asian excellence, Latino excellence. That's why we're doing this. Have them both, hold them both together. There is no only here. So that's kind of my little 2 cents at the end. But thank you all so much. This was as usual, people speaking their voices always makes my heart sing, and nobody here, everybody here was just like lived up to everything that I thought was going to be. You guys are, awesome, and just, open-hearted, and, honest about the difficulties, but also willing to look forward and make this better. And that's all we can ask. All right, so we are good. If you could change your mind, you could change the world. So until next time, later, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for having us.
Jason.